Welcome to the final chapter of our little tour through the disinformation underworld. If you've been paying attention, and I know at least 3 of you have been, you've realized this isn't just about internet trolls and conspiracy theories. This is about the weaponization of information to achieve strategic objectives without firing a shot. The World Economic Forum now ranks disinformation as one of the top global threats through 2025, right up there with armed conflict and environmental catastrophe. And yet, most of our agencies still treat it as a communications problem rather than an existential threat. It's like watching your agency respond to a cyber attack with a strongly worded memo. In this chapter, we'll examine how disinformation operates differently in authoritarian and democratic contexts, how it systematically erodes institutional trust, and how it drives political polarization to dangerous levels. For those of you checking your watches, yes, this is directly relevant to your operational environment. The same techniques being used to manipulate civilian populations are being deployed against your intelligence gathering processes right now. Maybe that explains some of those intelligence failures your directors blamed on insufficient data. So put down your phones, close your encrypted messaging apps, which we all know aren't as secure as your IT department claims, and pay attention. Your next mission's success might depend on recognizing when you're the target of these techniques rather than just studying them. In authoritarian regimes, disinformation isn't just a tactic, it's the foundation of governance. During the 2021 Belarus protests, state media systematically spread fabrications to discredit opposition leaders and justify violent crackdowns. If you've ever wondered what a perfectly executed information operation looks like, there's your case study, though don't mention that in your next performance review. These regimes have perfected what we call information sovereignty, a fancy term for we control the truth now. China's approach to information management isn't just comprehensive, it's almost artful in its efficiency. Their regulatory frameworks don't just censor, they shape entire worldviews while maintaining plausible deniability. It's like watching a master class in population control that our own agency heads probably download for research purposes. What's particularly concerning, or impressive, depending on which side of the intelligence briefing you're sitting on, is how these authoritarian playbooks are now being exported globally. China and Russia aren't just using disinformation domestically, they're actively shaping narratives worldwide. Those unexplained social media trends your analysts flagged last quarter might want to check if they originated from St. Petersburg or Beijing before dismissing them as random internet noise. The bitter irony? Some of these techniques look suspiciously similar to operations we've run ourselves, just with better funding and fewer oversight committees to navigate. The difference is mostly in the paperwork, not the methodology. That uncomfortable silence you're experiencing right now, that's your professional integrity having a quiet word with your operational history. In democracies, disinformation operates more like a slow-acting poison than a blunt instrument. The Senate Intelligence Committee report, which I'm sure all of you have read cover to cover and didn't just skim the executive summary, documented how foreign actors created thousands of divisive posts during the 2016 US election. Their goal wasn't necessarily to pick the winner, but to make us question the entire democratic process. A brilliant strategy, really. Why fight the system when you can convince it to tear itself apart? What makes this particularly effective is the plausible deniability factor. Unlike authoritarian regimes that slap their logo on propaganda, democratic targeted disinformation hides behind legitimate-looking sources and appeals to existing beliefs. It's like a well-executed false flag operation, something I'm sure none of you have ever been involved with. The Brookings Institution reports that disinformation campaigns have successfully undermined public confidence in democratic institutions across multiple Western nations. When citizens no longer trust election results, judicial decisions, or public health guidance, democratic governance becomes nearly impossible. It's like trying to run an intelligence operation when your assets don't trust you. A scenario I'm sure is purely hypothetical for everyone in this room. The World Economic Forum now lists disinformation as one of the most pressing global risks through 2025. Think about that. Not nuclear weapons, not climate change, but information itself. We've spent trillions on military hardware while our adversaries figured out they could accomplish the same goals with some well-placed Facebook posts. If that doesn't make you question your career choices, or at least your agency's budget priorities, nothing will. The long-term effects of disinformation should keep you up at night, besides those mandatory 3 a.m. shifts and the questionable coffee keeping you going. Trust erosion is rampant. The 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer shows record levels of distrust in media and institutions. People increasingly believe journalists deliberately mislead the public. That's higher than the disapproval rating of Congress, which is saying something. And yes, that includes your agencies too. The COVID pandemic provided a master class in how quickly disinformation can erode trust in public health institutions. Research shows vaccine misinformation led to preventable deaths, while simultaneously damaging trust in health authorities for years to come. It was like watching a perfectly executed intelligence operation, except none of us were running it. Or were we? That's classified, right? The most insidious part? Once trust is broken, rebuilding it takes generations. The Tufts University research showing how institutional trust, once lost, requires 20-plus years to recover should terrify anyone responsible for maintaining public confidence. That's longer than most of your careers, and definitely longer than your average director's attention span. So the next time your agency considers massaging the truth for operational expedience, remember you're not just burning one source. You're potentially torching an entire generation's trust. This algorithmic tribalism creates what scholars call effective polarization, where you don't just disagree with the other side, you actively despise them. When Cambridge University researchers found Americans increasingly view political opponents as enemies rather than legitimate rivals, that's not just an academic observation, it's a national security threat. It's harder to run human operations in a society where people won't even talk to each other across political lines. Though I suppose that explains the current state of interagency cooperation. This algorithmic tribalism creates what scholars call effective polarization, where you don't just disagree with the other side, you actively despise them. When Cambridge University researchers found Americans increasingly view political opponents as enemies rather than legitimate rivals, that's not just an academic observation, it's a national security threat. It's harder to run human operations in a society where people won't even talk to each other across political lines. Though I suppose that explains the current state of interagency cooperation. The most dangerous outcome is what researchers call reality divergence, where different segments of society literally experience different versions of reality. When Penn State research shows Americans can't even agree on basic facts like election results or pandemic data, that's not just polarization. It's the foundation for potential civil conflict. It makes writing intelligence assessments nearly impossible when your supervisors might reject facts based on their political leanings. Not that any of you have experienced that, of course. The strategic implications are profound. When democratic societies can't achieve basic consensus on reality, they become vulnerable to manipulation from both internal and external actors. It's like watching an adversary exploit the ultimate vulnerability in our national security system, not a technical backdoor, but a cognitive one. And unlike other threats, we can't just throw money at it, classify it, or drone strike it. Though I'm sure someone in this room has proposed at least one of those solutions. Let's get to the bottom line, because I know half of you have a classified briefing in 20 minutes that you haven't prepared for yet. Disinformation isn't just some academic concern or public affairs headache. It's a fundamental national security challenge that affects every aspect of your operations. First, accept that no political system is immune. Authoritarian regimes use it to control their populations while being increasingly vulnerable to bottom-up disinformation campaigns. Democracies are structurally susceptible due to their open information environments and reliance on public trust. Your intelligence operations are impacted regardless of which system you're working in or against. When the Edelman Trust Barometer shows that 64% of people are now inclined to distrust first, your human sources become harder to recruit, and your analysis gets questioned at every level. Institutional integrity isn't just an ethics training checkbox, it's operational necessity. Every time your agency manages perception instead of reporting reality, you're undermining the very trust you depend on. The research is clear. Once institutional trust is broken, recovery takes decades. That's longer than most of your careers, and certainly longer than your agency director's attention span. For intelligence professionals, recognition is defense. The same cognitive biases that make civilians vulnerable to disinformation affect your analytical processes too. That gut feeling your instructors praised at the academy, it's probably confirmation bias in a tactical vest. Implementing structured analytical techniques isn't just good practice. It's your cognitive body armor in an environment saturated with deliberate deception. Finally, remember that in the disinformation age, critical thinking isn't just for analysts. It's operational security for everyone in this room. Because the most dangerous piece of disinformation might not be what you're studying. It might be what you already believe. For those of you who actually look at sources, and I know there are at least 2 of you, here's your ammunition for when your superiors inevitably question your disinformation assessment. The 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer provides the most comprehensive global data on institutional trust, showing erosion across all major democracies, with particularly concerning trends in media and government sectors. Their methodology is sound, unlike some of the internal surveys your agencies conduct. The Senate Intelligence Committee's reports on foreign disinformation operations remain the most authoritative public documentation of how adversaries targeted U.S. information systems. The classified annexes go deeper, but even the public material should be mandatory reading for anyone working in national security. If you haven't read it, consider your security clearance intellectually compromised. The World Economic Forum's 2025 Global Risks Report identifies disinformation as one of the most significant threats to global stability, ranking it alongside armed conflict and climate change. When Davos billionaires are more concerned about fake news than tax increases, you know something fundamental has shifted in the threat landscape. Frontiers in Communication published groundbreaking research in February 2025, documenting how authoritarian regimes have systematically weaponized disinformation, both domestically and as foreign policy tools. Their comparative analysis of Chinese, Russian, and Iranian approaches reveals disturbing patterns of technical convergence. Finally, the Brookings Institution's 2025 Democracy Playbook provides the most practical framework for institutional responses to disinformation campaigns. Their evidence-based approach offers actionable countermeasures that go beyond the usual awareness training that your agencies probably still think is adequate. Remember, in our line of work, ignorance isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. These citations aren't academic fluff, they're operational intelligence about how your own cognitive environment is being compromised. Study accordingly. Thank you for joining our journey. This is Kaede, out.